In a quiet neighborhood in Buenos Aires, Clara is doing the dishes at her home when she hears murmurs from the drain pipe. She hears something so disturbing that she cannot do anything for the rest of the afternoon. When her husband Juan returns, he is surprised Clara hasn't prepared anything for dinner. She tells him about the noises she has been hearing all afternoon. Juan decides to check the pipes upon her request, but finds nothing unusual. He brushes off her concerns, saying the pipes are old and tend to clatter. He asks what she heard. A nervous Clara tells him the voices were planning to assassinate her. That night, Juan wakes up to a thudding noise. Thinking it is his neighbor Walter, who has the habit of fixing everything in his house at odd hours, Juan shouts at Walter through the wall to stop it. But when it doesn't stop, Juan walks to his house and curses him for disturbing him every day. When Juan returns to his house, he realizes the thumping is coming from the bathroom. He goes to check and is horrified to see Clara's body levitating mid-air as if some unseen force is making her dead body sway and slam into the walls repeatedly. Clara is long dead, and all that remains is her blood-covered body with flesh scraping off from the constant impact. He tries to get hold of her, but it doesn't stop until Clara's skull cracks and her neck breaks. Juan becomes the prime suspect in Clara's death, and the authorities are not willing to believe his story. So he is held in a psychiatric unit where paranormal investigators Dr. Maura Albrecht, Jano, and Rosenstock visit him. They assure him that they believe his story and show him some pictures from a similar case in the US in 1998. They believe Juan is innocent and are ready to help him collect concrete evidence to prove his innocence. They ask him if he saw anything unusual in his neighborhood. Juan thinks for some time and tells them about Walter and how he started remodeling the house at odd times of the day. Hearing Walter's name, their expressions change. Walter had reached out to them some days ago concerning things that were happening in his home. Walter, plagued by paranoia and insomnia, notices his furniture moving and suspects monsters under his bed. A tall, pale figure emerges from under the bed when he looks away. Suddenly, the light goes out. As Walter fixes his night lamp, this slender entity stands behind him, then dashes into the closet before Walter can see it. Too scared to investigate, Walter hides under his sheets, praying as the shadow of a hand with elongated fingers looms over him. The next morning, Walter wakes up to find all his furniture, including his bed, huddled together in one room. In desperate need of help, Walter calls Dr. Albrecht, but his situation is handled poorly by her secretary, who dissuades him from contacting them again without proof. Walter returns home, feeling perplexed, and stares at his house, contemplating whether to go inside. Just then, Juan walks by and complains about the noise. Walter lies that he is remodeling his house. Walter buys a camera and places it in his bedroom to gather proof so he can show it to Dr. Albrecht. He's woken up by the sound of the camera falling and sees the shadow of the entity. He grabs the camera and rewinds to see the pale, skinny, slender man standing by his bed looking at him while he sleeps. The entity then walks into the closet, and when closing the door, the camera falls. Now that he knows the entity is in the closet, he brings out a gun and moves to the closet only to find it empty. Feeling frustrated, he rewinds the footage to see where the entity might be hiding when the entity walks out of the closet behind him and grabs his gun, making him scream. Some days later, one of the kids from the neighborhood accidentally kicks his football into Walter's front yard. The little boy comes to retrieve it, and seeing a tap, he starts drinking water from it, but gets startled when Walter bangs on the window from behind the blinds and scares away the kid. The kid steps back into the road and is hit by an oncoming bus. The noise attracts Juan and Carla's attention, and Juan rushes out to see what happened. Seeing the boy lying in a pool of blood, Juan calls out to the boy's mother, Alicia. Unfortunately, the boy dies in the accident. 4 days after the tragic death of her child, Alicia receives a disturbing visit at her home marked by thuds on her door and a child's muddy footprints. Alicia's ex-boyfriend, Funes, a police commissioner, calls Jano, an old colleague, and asks for his help. Upon arrival, Jano immediately notices how scared the other officers look. Funes reveals the boy's corpse mysteriously returned home after burial. He takes Jano to see a ghastly pale corpse of the boy sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal and milk. The boy is dead and decomposing, but they have no answers about how he got there. Jano notices the boy's fingers are torn as if he has dug himself out of his grave. He suggests they need to bury the kid again. They're waiting for the services when Jano recognizes Dr. Albrecht taking pictures of Walter's house. She's finally there to visit him, but Walter has gone missing, Jano takes this opportunity to take her to see the dead boy's corpse to get more insight. Funes is not happy that Jano brought a colleague as he wanted to keep it discreet, but Jano assures him of Dr. Albrecht's expertise. He directs Funes to handle the reburial as he and Dr. Albrecht discuss the situation. Amidst this, Patricio, a neighbor and friend of the deceased child, enters Alicia's garden to retrieve his toys and is shocked to find his friend seemingly alive at the table. But when the corpse turns its head, Patricio screams. Dr. Albrecht and Jano rush to see what happened and find Patricio's bag. Dr. Albrecht suggests they need to move the corpse. Jano carries the corpse to the freezer outside the house, which is all recorded by Patricio on his cell phone. Funes returns and Jano takes him to the freezer, where they hear a child sobbing before a loud thud rattles it. Dr. Albrecht warns Funes that he needs to cooperate if he doesn't want the kid to come back again. At present, the 3 paranormal investigators convince Juan to sign a declaration and permission form to investigate his house. They say his house is one of the 3 houses affected by the paranormal events. He permits them. The 3 investigators reach the troubled street and decide to split up. Rosenstock and Funes explore Walter's house, while Dr. Albrecht investigates Juan's and Jano searches Alicia's. Using weird equipment to detect paranormal activity, Rosenstock is first attacked by an unseen force that impales his hand to a cabinet with a knife, drawing blood in a bizarre vampiric manner. Funes is scared, but Rosenstock stays calm and even shows excitement that they are close to finding a supernatural entity. When they finally see it hiding under the bed, Funes gets scared out of his wits and runs to see Jano. Jano, too, has his first encounter with the entity when it appears on the window out of nowhere. Upon hearing banging and seeing blood on a cupboard door, Funes discovers Jano transformed and unrecognizable, with splinters embedded in his eyes. Meanwhile, Dr. Albrecht spots Walter, altered and inhuman, inside a crack, but his pale skin and dark eyes convey he's no longer a human. Just then, Funes arrives there seeking help for Jano, but Dr. Albrecht remains indifferent and asks him not to trust everything he sees. She asks him to clean his blood-covered hands to avoid attracting the entities. Funes, meanwhile, has a full-blown panic attack. Dr. Albrecht suddenly decides they must stop the investigation as they're exposing themselves to the danger. She turns on her nerd mode to give some insight to Funes so he can make sense of what's happening. She talks about parallel dimensions where microscopic beings use water to travel and nest, turning humans into hosts through tap water, which leads to a mysterious condition. But she's puzzled as to why these hosts are being aggressive. Funes is curious to know if there's a way to stop them, but just as Dr. Albrecht says no, a hand comes out of the crack and breaks her neck. This is too much for Funes to handle, and he drops to the ground, trying to control his heart, which feels like it will explode. He does himself a favor by shutting his eyes tight because the entity that crawls to his side is a monster straight out of a nightmare. He soon gains consciousness and struggles to get up, but when he sees the furniture moving on its own, he drags himself, but his condition doesn't allow him to go much further. He pulls out his gun, ready to shoot down these creatures, but is surprised to see Alicia standing before him. She accuses him of taking away her boy after she saw the video Patricio had recorded. He pleads with her to take him to the hospital, after which he'll explain everything. She agrees, and as he walks to her car, he sees her son's corpse sitting in the back seat. He says nope and rushes to his car. As he's pulling away, a contorted Dr. Albrecht comes running to his window and demands that he save them, but he drives away. He stops and smokes by the roadside when a drastic plan strikes him. He returns to the neighborhood with gasoline and goes into Alicia's house, where he finds her hanging. In a fit of rage, he douses the 3 houses in gasoline and sets them ablaze. At the psychiatric unit, Juan is further questioned by the police about the 3 paranormal investigators who visited him last year and Funes, who is now considered a fugitive. However, he gets distracted by a tall figure behind the officers, who happens to be Rosenstock but has a burned face. The officers turn to see no one there when suddenly the chair flies towards them. That's a wrap for today's horror recap of the movie Terrified. Hit the subscribe button to prevent the pale naked man from visiting you at night, and press the bell icon for extra protection.